Paul McKay is a past board member of both APRO and the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association. He's won Canada's top award for investigative reporting, feature and business writing several times. He's also the author of 4 published books, including Atomic Accomplice, How Canada Deals in Deadly Deceit, and that book will be available at the bookstore. He was the Toronto Star-sponsored Atkinson Fellowship in Public Policy recipient in 1990 and the Pierre Burton Writer-in-Residence in 2005. His investigative and feature writing has appeared in the Toronto Star, Globe and Mail, Ottawa Citizen, Kingston Week Standard, Harrowsmith Magazine, and Maclean's Magazine. He currently runs the Wildside Foundation, which directs charitable donations to solar projects in remote, impoverished areas of Latin America and Africa. Please welcome Paul McKay, who's going to offer our first keynote of the day.
Like most people, I wake up every morning and thank God I'm not an economist. And not just because economics is known as the dismal science, or because, as George Bernard Shaw once wisecracked, if all the economists were laid end to end, they would not reach a conclusion. Later, President Harry Truman complained that he desperately wanted to meet a one-armed economist because his always said, on one hand this could happen, on the other hand. So today I want to both congratulate Chris Bentley on his new posting as Ontario's Minister of Energy, and unilaterally appoint myself as his first Chief Policy Advisor on Energy Economics for the next 30 minutes. Warning, the following contains factually explicit material. It is intended solely for adult audiences. Dear Minister, before, during, and since the provincial election, high decibel detractors of Ontario's landmark FIT program have decried payments made for solar panels on farmers' barns, IKEA rooftops, and hockey rinks, forecast resulting punitive hydro bills, raise the specter of wind turbines causing cancer, and condemn the satanic use of subsidies and governments meddling in the electricity marketplace. This was largely orchestrated by the armchair editorialists at the Financial Post. They took turns claiming that feed-in tariffs will fleece ratepayers, provided Tim Hudak's campaign crib notes, then quoted his stump speeches, and then headlined a post-election study written by themselves, purporting to show that Ontarians will soon rue the day they failed to vote the right way. I think the last time a newspaper chain so brazenly tried to engineer an election result was in the 1941 Orson Welles film classic, Citizen Kane. Kane lost too, badly. The Post has also put OCAA, the Premier, David Suzuki, and Nobel Prize laureates at the nexus of a global junk science, junk economics plot to invent a phony climate crisis, impose carbon taxes and feed-in tariffs, and then somehow transfer the stolen wealth to the unwashed and undeserving in undeveloped countries. Luckily, they have not yet discovered the secret Swiss bank accounts where all these billions are stashed. So welcome to our world, Minister. It is war out there. My first piece of advice is to give those past prime pundits the attention they deserve. Like the dotty old man Dorothy found behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz, these ideologues are full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, and also have a propensity for getting carried away on hot air. They are dead wrong that it costs the Liberals a majority and that the FIT program embeds egregious subsidies which profit only a few. Let's start with basic math. Last month, about 2/3 of Ontarians voted for parties, the Liberals, NDP, and Greens, which advocated the FIT program in their election platforms. Only 1/3 voted for the Conservatives, who alone opposed it. It is more likely that this led in large part to Mr. Hudak hitting a vote wall in the campaign stretch. He was the chief casualty of his own reckless rhetoric, and his anti-wind allies only played to his base while concocting health damages Ontario's chief medical officer of health cannot find any trace of. So be bold. Don't be stampeded into concluding that defending feed-in tariffs is bad politics, or grant more concessions to anti-wind zealots and whack jobs who produce more noise than the turbines they hate. It will only encourage them and set a terrible precedent. Now, what about all those evil subsidies? During the campaign, the favorite piñata for Mr. Hudak and the Post pundits to punch was the FIT payments to microsolar projects. They repeatedly compared the highest tariff rate to the market price of about 5 cents a kilowatt hour, claiming this as proof of off-the-scale subsidies which are jacking up hydro bills. But if you drill down into the details, you will discover, Mr. Minister, that this price only applies to solar systems 10 kilowatts or smaller. The cumulative amount of kilowatt hours all these microsystems produce each year is negligible. It is like paying a heart transplant surgeon $200 per hour, but only hiring them for 20 hours per year. It's the total payment that matters, and the combined impact of all these microfit payments on household hydro bills is so small it cannot be detected. Moreover, these solar panels produce power at exactly the right time and place to offset summer peak demand in Ontario. New natural gas peaking plants will cost up to $1.64 per kilowatt hour, or twice the highest tariff paid for solar. So be bold. Don't betray Ontario's new domestic solar sector and related green jobs because of distorted political optics. The higher tariffs are the result of OPA-imposed limits on project size, which preclude economies of scale. When building a 3,500 megawatt nuclear plant like Darlington is encouraged, but solar parks are confined to 10 megawatts, a perverse price difference will result. So make the rules fair. Either limit nuclear plants to 10 megawatts or take the arbitrary limit off green project size. The OPA won't even allow solar projects larger than 10 megawatts per property on landfill buffer zones, mine reclamation lands in Northern Ontario, or municipal brownfield sites. These should have the highest priority. Even a 100 megawatt solar site on very lousy land would require only one environmental assessment, one grid connection point. Right now, however, 10 megawatt sites require 10 properties to be acquired, 10 reviews, and 10 connection point studies. That means added costs, longer delays in construction, panel order, and green job hirings, and 10 times the bureaucratic processing. All for the same 100 megawatts of output and the same amount of land used. How smart is that? Speaking of perverse price signals, oops, I'm behind here. The nuclear plants, which now produce half our electricity, have been bankrolled by more than $30 billion in past federal and provincial taxpayer subsidies. Billions more in reactor dismantling and high-level waste disposal costs have been offloaded to future generations. Federal taxpayers continue to pay hundreds of millions for new reactor designs despite no booked orders, and are backstopping accident insurance coverage no private insurer would touch with a pole shorter than the CN Tower. Yet despite these subsidies, Ontario's nuclear fleet costs sent the old Ontario Hydro into bankruptcy in 1999, holding $38 billion in unpaid public debts. Almost $20 billion of that was deemed stranded and moved to a new government ledger for eventual collection from power users. Since then, $19 billion in interest payments have been paid, but that outstanding nuclear debt remains at about $14 billion. It will likely not get paid off until 2020. These covert nuclear subsidies make our electricity market a charade. None of the nuclear debt is included in the market price. And that lowball market price is further cross-subsidized by money-losing OPG coal plants, which pay no pollution penalties for using smokestacks as aerial sewers to relentlessly emit sulfur, nitrous oxides, lead, mercury, heavy metals, and carbon into the public atmosphere. So it is a war out there, Minister. That is what new green power projects have to compete against. And they are not the only casualties. For decades, false low-ball price signals have been politically popular, but led to building and outfitting countless industries, office towers, hospitals, schools, farms, and homes on the premise that power is far cheaper than it really is. So millions of industrial motors, appliances, hot water tanks, air conditioners, bulk milk coolers, hotel room heaters, and millions of square feet of space from condominiums to senior homes waste power. That's why we use 50% more energy per capita than New York State. So be bold. You have inherited a woefully inefficient infrastructure, a province trapped by its own addiction to electricity, and an entitlement culture which assumes that cheap 24/7 power can be delivered from somewhere far away as if by immaculate conception. As with any addict, the smartest, cheapest, fastest remedy is to cut the habit, not merely find a new source of supply. A recent Ontario-specific study, spearheaded by the astute maverick economist Jack Gibbons, I've gone too far here, confirmed that investing in efficiency can wring negawatts from our economy at a price far, far cheaper than building new power plants. California has already reaped a similar efficiency dividend. Can I suggest, Mr. Minister, that you study that like scripture before you come to work each morning? I know Jack will courier you a free copy. Now I'd like to turn to why green power is Ontario's game-changer asset for economic, employment, environmental, and ethical reasons. Ontario now confronts the ominous fiscal task of paying down some $14 billion in outstanding nuclear debt, plus finding up to $75 billion to invest in energy efficiency, replacement power plants, and grid improvements by 2025. This means making tough choices, and not just between which power plants to build. Ontario is facing these debt and capital costs just as population demographics are causing public health care costs to soar, manufacturing jobs are being lost to China, India, and Brazil, and another recession looms. This is a perfect storm for fiscal calamity. The provincial deficit and long-term debt, oops, I'm ahead. The provincial deficit and long-term debt are already at the red line. Bond rating agencies are poised to reduce Ontario's credit rating, with punishing austerity measures and cumulative interest payments the eventual result. What do you think they will do if the province adds another $26 billion or more in debt financing for new OPG nuclear plants? Think deep Greek debt crisis, but in a place with maple trees and trilliums. So critics of the Ontario feed-in tariff program should give their heads a shake, swallow some humble pie, and start to praise green power instead of trying to bury it. Here's why. First, these green companies, co-ops, municipalities, farmers, and First Nation project developers are the only ones willing to finance and build power plants on a contractual pay-for-performance basis. They borrow the money on real-world bank terms and conditions. They take all the risk, including paying the full shot for project insurance. They don't get paid an extra cent if their project has cost overruns, selects the wrong contractor, turbine, or solar panel, has bad management, requires unplanned repairs, or can't put juice into the grid for any reason. If they don't deliver as promised, they don't get paid, period. By contrast, building new nuclear plants will leave the public 100% liable for borrowing $26 billion or more, and for paying all future interest costs, construction delays and cost overruns, all lifetime repair bills, any subpar performance during the next 30 years, for all reactor decommissioning costs, and for safely securing nuclear waste for centuries. So, just in the nick of time, the green feed-in tariff represents a radical shift of risks and costs away from the public and the current provincial balance sheet to those who build the green power plants, whether they are 10 kilowatts or 100 or 10 or 100 megawatts. It also enables 21st century entrepreneurship, technology innovation, transparency, and social inclusion. Second, this is one of the few sectors creating manufacturing jobs in Ontario and countering the flight of capital and jobs to Asia. These new green jobs are opening up just as youth employment is at an all-time high, and green tech training courses at community colleges are fully subscribed. At St. Lawrence College in Kingston, for example, enrollment is escalating, graduates are getting hired immediately, and a large solar rooftop fit projects are being built on 2 campuses there, which will earn long-term revenues for the college. These pending careers will support other jobs depending on consumer spending and generate taxes to help pay escalating healthcare costs. This is not proof of command and control planning or governments meddling in the markets or picking corporate winners. That was the case with the failed US solar company Solyndra, which got paid before it performed. And that is the case with nuclear plants. The public pays tens of billions of dollars in capital construction costs before they can power up a single toaster. But the FIT model is inherently conservative in the best sense, because the basic rule is, if you don't deliver the juice, the public pays nothing. Now this may gobsmack the pundits over at the Financial Post, but the FIT program is actually evidence of a government retreating from the sector it has dominated and subsidized for a century, while crafting rules and realistic pricing mechanisms which allow private, cooperative, individual, municipal, and First Nation entrepreneurship to flourish. Minister, I am certain the global advent of green power is as inevitable as the internet vaulting the Great Wall of China, or the take-up of cell phones in the poorest areas of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Only a decade ago, these were unthinkable or unavailable or unaffordable for only a few. But their functionality and low costs driven by mass production changed all that. Despite an often despotic government, digital democracy in China is now unstoppable, and farmers in rural Kenya or street stall vendors in Jakarta often have better, cheaper cell phone service than we do in rural Ontario. Thrillingly, the same dynamic is now at play with green power technologies. Worldwide investments are on a steep incline. The price per watt for solar panels has decreased 70% since 2008. And wind power costs per watt have fallen 20% due to design innovation, better production processes, and lower material usage and cost. Just as smartphones served as the spark for countless ingenious ways to revolutionize social networks and business, and even for actual revolutions, as with the recent Arab Spring uprising, the green power sector is underpinning the development of complementary smart grid power storage and interactive grid transfer technologies. Here, efficiency, economics, and scale are imminent key drivers. Consider this startling fact. Grid-charged electric engines can get people from point A to point B at 1/5 the fuel cost of gas engines. A new electric vehicle can go 24,000 kilometers for less than $500 on grid-charged power in Canada. It costs $2,100 to go the same distance in a comparably sized gas vehicle. That $1,600 saving can be used to entirely pay off a typical annual household hydro bill. This is one example of the efficiency dividend, but there is even better news. There are already more than 200 million vehicles in North America, which collectively hold 30 times more power in their batteries than the combined peak power output of the continent's power plants. These vehicles are idle, on average, 80% of each day. So here's what's coming. The 20th century grid model, which saw electrons flow only one way from giant, expensive, and often dangerous power plants, will be replaced by an interactive two-way electron flow which reacts in milliseconds to regional demand and supply choices. Much of the power will be charged in millions of high-density vehicle batteries at night, then dispensed daily via plug-in outlets as they sit idle in garages, workplace parking lots, car dealerships, airport rental compounds, and shopping malls. These batteries will likely be leased with change-out scheduled like regular maintenance. They will have smart chips and will act just like bank ATM machines, depositing and withdrawing electrons instead of cash. Citizens will get a statement at the end of each month calculating their net electron balance and the cost for charging and selling based on off-peak and on-peak rates. People will be their own mobile utility. This imminent game-changing combination of economics and scale explains why billions in smart investment capital around the world is accelerating towards green power projects, grid storage technologies, battery development, and electric vehicle production. When they reach critical mass, fit-driven infrastructure initiatives, which foster both green grids and electric vehicles, could liberate not only the power fiefdoms of electric utilities by making most centralized power plants obsolete, they could even assault the oligopolies of big oil by making millions of gas engines as relevant as typewriters in the age of the laptop. So the future market for green power generation in Ontario is not just the grid and replacing some 14,000 megawatts of nuclear and coal capacity, but seizing a big chunk of the current gasoline market. That means Ontario green power generators of all makes, models, and sizes and forms of ownership can collectively take on tar sands crude, Texas refiners, and Middle East sheikdoms on our home turf, and keep billions more in annual energy dollars in Ontario, while CAW members make electric cars and parts here. This synergy applies wherever electricity and gasoline are consumed, which is everywhere. That's why non-oil or non-utility giants like General Electric, Siemens, Samsung, Sharp, Toshiba, China's BYD, and India's Tata conglomerate are getting into the game in a big way. It's why Toyota is building an all-electric RAV4 in Woodstock, and Magna is racing to build a supply chain for electric vehicles, and why companies like Ford and SunPower have formed a joint venture to sell electric cars and solar panels from the same showrooms across the continent. In essence, they are racing to unlock the hidden multi-trillion-dollar value in the fuel cost and efficiency differential between electric and gasoline engines. In the last 3 months alone, investments in global green power projects were up 16% to $42 billion. That's in the last 3 months. U.S. venture capital investments in grid storage technologies reached $865 million this year. Recently, German banks announced $130 billion in support for green power and smart grid projects for just the next 5 years. Mercedes, BMW, and Volkswagen are already previewing electric models there. Das Auto is going EV fast. Based on recent investment and cost trends, even that notorious socialist outfit known as Goldman Sachs has forecast that within 3 years, green power parks will reach cost parity with new U.S. coal plants. Millions of electric vehicles will be right behind. The interactive grid will be right behind those. If this strikes you as fanciful, Minister, consider this. Only a few decades ago, a college dropout and California dreamer called Steve Jobs looked out over a U.S. information infrastructure dominated by a few large television and radio networks, movie studios, record labels, data processing companies, and news media moguls. They closely controlled the generation, transmission, direction, and content of communication. They decided what programs aired, what music got label backing and radio airplay, what films and videos got made and distributed, and what books were published. How business data was compiled, and what news was deemed important. Everyone assumed this system was effectively hardwired and closed-circuited. But Jobs' genius was to understand that modern Americans crave to be liberated from this one-way, myopic, self-serving straitjacket that confined culture, business, politics, journalism, and social relations, and that this could be radically changed by combining the personal computer and internet in everyone's home. Then their genius could be unleashed and shared with the world. Jobs wanted to scale up and out innovations of all kinds. The networks, studios, record labels, news empires, and tech titans like IBM and AT&T scoffed at the first tiny computer that emerged from his garage. Later, they dismissed prototype iPods and iPhones. Their empires were seemingly impregnable, but his ingenuity, entrepreneurial drive, conviction, grit, and intuition triumphed. He left behind not only a revolution in modern communication, but a low-carbon company with a market capitalization bigger than high-carbon Exxon's. Many countries, states, and provinces like Ontario would love to have Apple Inc.'s current balance sheet. All this was deemed impossible only a few decades ago. Now, entrenched electricity carriers like Hydro One are facing similar radical shakeups from outside agitators. Because electrons are not so different from digital data packets, grids will be stormed not by force, but swarmed by better, greener, smarter, nimbler mousetraps and apps, ingenuity, and ethics-driven entrepreneurship. Grids of the future will be key conduits for new forms and increased flows of commerce, and the pressure of global competition will demand that they become agents of change, not opponents. Hydro One will need not only a major technical upgrade to accommodate distributed generation and electric vehicles, it needs a huge attitude overhaul. Currently, Minister, this public agency is thwarting your government's green energy directives. Since the launch of the FIT program, it has sandbagged thousands of project applications with highly dubious claims of system constraints, arbitrary transformer and voltage limits, and connection cost demands that are often double or triple those required by municipal electric utilities for comparable hookups. Examples abound from all across Ontario. They range across all generation types and sizes. Everyone in this business knows Hydro One's deliberately dragging its ass, and that's putting it diplomatically. There are 29,383 microfit applications and only 8,494 connected. Hundreds of larger projects with OPA contracts remain on the Economic Connection Test limbo list. And meanwhile, municipal utilities are connecting projects faster and cheaper. This Hydro One obstructionism means the entire supply chain and green jobs that go with these projects is being effectively sabotaged. Minister, your most important task is to assert full control over Hydro One to ensure the grid becomes more resilient, is soon prepared for the advent of electric vehicles, and is transformed into an open conduit for two-way electron commerce of the future. 4 things can help you achieve this quickly. 1, adopt the aggressive energy, efficiency, and cogeneration measures in Jack Gibbons' report, which will reduce province-wide power demand and extend the life of existing Hydro One high-voltage circuits and transformers. Proceed with the announced high-voltage circuit upgrades. 2, insist that Ottawa match the $2.2 billion it has gifted to Western Canada carbon capture projects with equivalent funds to upgrade the Hydro One distribution circuits. Those subsidies are on top of more than $1 billion in annual federal tax breaks these private oil patch companies receive to mine and burn fossil fuels. So they get taxpayer money, including from taxpayers in Ontario, to do the wrong thing and then get billions more to help clean up their act. Inexplicably, I have not heard the Financial Post howling about these satanic subsidies, or the $409 billion in government subsidies the Global Carbon Club received last year. That was 6 times what the global renewable sector received. So please arm twist Stephen Harper into sending the same amount to Ontario to help build a green grid. Invested in a public transmission system, this extra $2.2 billion would ensure that Ontario's latent green power potential gets distributed. It would bolster the grid to match increased supply demand from electric vehicles and cut far more carbon. 3, like Germany, Spain, Italy, Austria, Switzerland, Belgium, and Japan have recently done, cancel plans for any new nuclear plants. They are too expensive, will worsen the provincial balance sheet, and cannot be built in time to replace the 4 Darlington reactors due for major and expensive overhauls beginning in 2016. Instead, your government can keep that $26 billion for looming public health care expenses if you enhance the FIT program instead of crippling it, because no tariffs have to be paid until the projects deliver the juice. You can start with ordering Hydro One to contractually commit to connect within 24 months the now stranded ECT projects, or pay projects developers stiff penalties. This penalty clause is not unprecedented. The last beneficiary was the private Bruce nuclear plant owners. Then ECT project approvals and construction can get underway in 2012, and jobs can be generated so this new green power can be delivered just when the Darlington reactors go down for billion-dollar repairs in 2016. You can build now using other people's money, but pay them back over decades, and conserve precious public funds for healthcare. The FIT legislation provides for regular reviews of prices, rules, and conditions. The sector expects and accepts that prices should fall to match falling component costs. That is built into the model. However, the domestic content rules mean Ontario labour costs and taxes must be a key factor in future tariffs here. It would be penny wise but pound foolish to drive down FIT payments to the point where Ontario solar and wind component manufacturers pack up and leave the province. Then we would have no green power and no green jobs. You can't insist 60% of the components be made in Ontario, but expect to pay tariffs as if they are made in China. Ontario also needs new aggressive FIT tariffs for energy storage technologies, combined heat and power projects, concentrating on solar thermal projects, and geothermal. These will provide a combination of baseload energy and peak demand offsets, as they already do in Europe. To conclude, the convergence of green power and electric vehicles in Ontario has game-changer potential for our economy. It will come far sooner if energy price signals are accurate, pollution damages and risks are accounted for, and green power's literally dirty and dangerous competitors don't enjoy overt or covert subsidies. Let's end all subsidies. The sooner the better. But until that day comes, the FIT program is Ontario's best mechanism to solve energy, employment, and environmental problems. Despite the howling from some quarters, analysts like Ernst & Young have found it the most efficient way to deploy funds. It may not be the single best way to buy new power, or create new jobs, or clean up smog, reduce the peril of climate change, or retreat from dependence on dangerous nuclear plants. But if you ask, what's the best way to do all of this with the same investment dollar, the FIT mechanism wins hands down. This fiscal precision is why post-Fukushima Japan and even China have followed Germany and Ontario's lead by recently announcing their own huge feed-in tariff programs. These additional giant players will soon accelerate global green energy production and related jobs, ratchet down prices and deadly emissions, and usher in the age of the electric car. This is a real renaissance. It will put Ontario in very smart, globally competitive company because it is the surest, fastest path to a green and prosperous future. So be bold, Minister. Dare to be bold. Thank you.